this is Linda Lysakowski with our podcast today, and I'm really excited to introduce you to Ligia Peña, CFRE. I should add that CFRE. We work hard for those designations, but I'm really I've known, oh gosh, I don't know how long ago we met. Probably
Mm.
20 years. I don't know.
Yeah, a couple of years, yes.
A few years, but we're not that old though, of course, either of us.
No,
Well, Alicia's
no.
not nearly as old as I am, but anyway, uh, I was always fascinated by her name. That She goes by the Globetrotting Fundraiser. So I'm going to
Mhm.
start by asking you, Ligia, how you got that name and how many countries you have trotted into in your career.
Well, it's funny because Globetrotting Fundraiser started as just a blog. In 2016, I got my dream job working at Greenpeace International, being the global legacy manager. So my job entailed supporting the different Greenpeace offices around the world who had a legacy program or wanted to start one. So I would help them with capacity building, strategy development, etc. And so that meant I traveled a lot. And Josh, my friend Josh, suggest when I disclosed that I was going to be doing this kind of work, my friend Josh said, "Hey, you should start a blog where you talk about." The places you travel, but also talk about what you learn about the fundraising markets and legacies in those different countries. I thought, oh, that's a pretty cool idea. And he's the one that suggested the name Globetrotting Fundraiser. So I started it, and on and off, I would blog when I had time because when you travel for business, it's not like when you travel for fun and pleasure. Um, and yeah, so I started the blog, and that was it. And then when I decided to go off and start my own consulting company, I thought, well, the brand was already there. I was already known as the Globetrotting Fundraiser, so it stuck. And so here we are, nearly 10 years later, and still going with the Globetrotting Fundraising.
So how many countries have you worked in?
Um, so as part of my work at Greenpeace, we had the organization had legacy programs in, I'm trying to remember, about 15 different markets.
Wow.
In varying degrees of development, obviously. And so yeah, so that was about 15 or 16. I should go back and like sit down and count them, really. Um, but I've worked with organizations in other countries where I hadn't been. That kind of work has continued since I started Globetrotting Fundraiser.
Yeah, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, I haven't worked in probably nearly as many as you have, but I have had clients in Canada, and Ligia, of course, is located in Canada, in
Mhm.
Mexico, and Egypt. And when I started my consulting business, which was 35 years ago, I guess, I decided that I really wanted to travel more. And so I did get the opportunity to travel to some great places. England,
Mhm.
I don't think I had a client in England, but I spoke in England, I believe. And and then as I got older, I was like, man, I'm sick of this traveling. So I wanted to kind of stay a little bit closer to home and do some
Mhm.
online things. And I do a lot of online consulting. Do you do that as
Mhm.
well?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, now everything is really remote, right? So, and especially where I live. So I live outside of Montreal in Canada, about an hour north of Montreal. So I'm no longer in the city like I used to. I live in the woods on a in the countryside on a lake. So,
Oh,
and that was by choice. I moved here 3 years ago. And so obviously I'm not, Montreal and Ottawa are the closest big cities to me. But most of my clients are a little bit around the world. So all the work is done virtually. And I mean, I was already working like that prior to the pandemic because that was the nature of how working at Greenpeace was, that we were a dispersed organization with people all over the world. So that was really cool. So it wasn't a difficult transition when the pandemic hit and everyone had to work from home. But I think it just what the pandemic did help organizations and just all workplace around, no matter what sector you work in, how it opened, management's eyes to the reality that working from home does not necessarily mean that you spend your whole day eating popcorn in your pajamas in front of
Right.
TV, right? Because I remember having this debate at an organization, a small Montreal-based organization I used to work at many years ago, where I felt I was more productive when I worked from home than in the school, where I would get, distracted more often. And I remember having this debate with leadership. And he's like, well, it's the appearance. I'm like, I don't care about the appearance. As long as my work is done, I can write 3 grant proposals in a day when I work from home. Whereas at the office, you can't get that kind of focused time. And so anyway, that's a bit of a roundabout way of answering that question. But yeah, all my work is remote, which is great, because if you do want to do international work, um I would say, well, like, I mean, there's still an element of, in order to get known internationally, you still need to get out there. You still need to go and present at conferences around the world. And quite honestly, like, that's probably one of the things I love the most. Of course, I love working with organizations abroad, but most of the new business development happens at conferences around the world.
I think we're definitely on the same path because I also enjoy, getting out and speaking at conferences, and it gets you to a lot of places that perhaps you wouldn't have been. And I remember the client I had in Mexico. I was speaking in Mexico City at AFP's Hemispheric Conference one
Mhm.
year, and this man came up to me after the uh, conference and said, would you be able to come and work with my organization? But I'm in Monterrey, Canada, Mexico. And I said, sure, I can work with it. And it was a great relationship. But what's your favorite country that you got to work in?
Oh, I get asked that all the time, but it's a hard thing to answer because, well, you don't want to insult anybody and be like,
Right.
well, yeah, but we like you here, you know. Um, the thing is, I can't say there's any one place I dislike. I think I like them because I've always been a traveler. You know how some people, like, they live to work or they live to eat. I live to travel, you know? Um, so there's not one particular place that I like more than others, because I see every new destination as a new adventure and an opportunity for me to learn. So oftentimes when I go and present at conferences, people, participants come to a conference to learn from you. But sometimes I wonder, like, do they realize that all as a presenter, I learn so much from them, and it pushes me to think differently. And that's what I'm seeking from these experiences, both at a professional level, but at a personal level, is what can I learn about this culture? How are others doing X, Y, and Z, so that, maybe I can adapt my approach. And so that's what feeds me, you know. Last year was bananas. I did 2 roadshows, and I'll tell you, I'll never do 2 roadshows in one year because it nearly broke me. So the first roadshow was 2.5 weeks in Mexico,
Oh, wow.
6 cities in 2.5 weeks. It was bananas. And then I did the one in Australia, going
Oh,
from West Perth on the west side all the way to Sydney, and that honestly nearly broke me as well. But
um,
it was just so rewarding and so exciting to see how, like, for instance, in Mexico, how different doing a presentation in Cancun and Riviera Maya to Monterrey to Puerto Vallarta to Mexico, how completely different the philanthropic sector was, and how completely differently they are developed. And I think as North Americans, we stand so much to learn from other markets, even if those markets are not developed as much philanthropically, or they are, but in a different way. Because and I'm probably gonna have like really bad comments, but I've made this comment at an AFP conference once before, and boy, did the negative comments came in, because I challenged fundraisers and participants to consider the possibility that we may, and when I say we, I say North America or the Western Hemisphere, we may not be doing legacies the best way that you could be. That perhaps there are other things we could be integrating in the way we do plan giving and
Mm.
legacy giving that we can learn from other markets.
That is so true.
And well, yeah, but you know what? I was astounded. First of all, quite a few people stood up and left. And I was like, well, that's fine.
Wow.
Cool. I mean, if you come to a conference to learn something, a presenter challenges you to think about things differently and you get ticked off and walk away. All right. Well, you just showed me who you are, right? But then I was stunned at reading the comments, and people took it so bad.
Really?
And I just thought, well, you know what? Then you weren't there to learn. You were there to reconfirm what you think you already know.
I think if our listeners take anything away from this, besides all your wisdom that you're going to share with us, I think that's such a good point that if you go to a conference, or I just recently led a retreat for a bunch of women, and there were some women there that had some negative comments. And I think they don't, people don't come to learn and to be challenged, maybe. But I have to tell you a quick story, even though this is your show. But when you were talking about Mexico, when I presented at in Mexico City, they of course gave me headphones because I do not speak. I'm embarrassed to admit that I speak no language other than English, and I'm really embarrassed by that. But they gave me a headset so that people who didn't speak English could. And at the
Mhm.
end, when they started asking questions, I still had my headset on. And one lady asked a question apparently in English, and so it translated into Spanish. And I'm standing there like, oh, I'm in big trouble now. So
Oh no.
blending into the culture is so I said, let me know if you're going to ask in English, raise your hand, and then I'll take
Yeah.
off the headset. So I got
Yeah.
Spanish,
Yeah,
but I could
for
have.
sure.
That's
Yeah.
so true that we can learn from other cultures. In fact, when you're talking about legacy giving, when I worked with this client in Egypt, I had not worked in a Muslim country before, and I was my first exposure to zakat, the
Hmm.
Muslim tradition of giving while you're alive and after you die. And they
Hmm.
said to me, we don't really have to do anything to promote planned giving. It's part of our culture. Everybody's
Yeah.
going to leave money in their will no matter what. But of course,
Hmm.
you want to get on there on their list.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but I think there's just a lot to be learned from other countries. So tell me
Oh,
about that.
absolutely.
That's kind of fascinating that you said, um, maybe we're not the best at legacy giving. So tell me what your experience has been.
I'm not saying that we're not the best. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is that we have our ways of doing things, and
Hmm.
because that's how it was developed decades and decades ago, um, and it has evolved based on our own, you know, culture, fiscal systems, economic systems, beliefs, etc. So I'm not saying that we're not doing well. We are, obviously, we're raising money.
Hmm.
What I'm saying is it would be it behooves me to think that you don't want to look outside in other markets to see, hey, what are others doing? And are they doing something that perhaps we can replicate or adapt for our own markets
Hmm.
to see if we can raise even more? So when you look at how much, and we're going to talk about specifically about the US because we have that data. We don't have it in Canada. But when you look at overall fundraising in the US, planned giving represents only 9% of all giving.
Hmm.
Okay. This is the biggest economy. Well, maybe lately it's kind of questionable, but yeah, it is the biggest economy in the world. And only 9% of all philanthropic dollars come from planned giving.
Mhm.
Don't tell me that there's no potential for more, right?
Right.
When you look at the UK and you look at how much legacies, and keep in mind, in the US, we're talking about planned giving. So gifts and wills, life insurance, annuities, trusts, et cetera, and like a long list of other complicated financial vehicles, right? When you look at the UK, which is only gifts and wills, it's about, if I'm going to have to verify this, I'm going to have to fact check me, but it's about 18%.
Wow. I did not know
And,
that. That's
and
amazing.
it's a teeny tiny little
I
country,
know.
you know? In France, last time I checked, this was a few years ago when I presented at the French fundraising conference, it was 23%. And
Wow.
that includes gifts and wills and gifts of life insurance.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, as an American, you should be indignant to this number because, we always say, oh, yeah, we're doing great. We're doing great. Sure, it's not bad. There's, not throwing shade at 9%. It is a significant, it's 9% in the US is a significant amount of money, but there is room for improvement. So that was my point is, well, why don't we look at how it's being done in the UK, for instance, how it's being done in Germany, in the Netherlands? Why is it that those countries that have much smaller population can raise a bigger percentage of philanthropic dollars?
That's amazing. I was not aware of those. And what is it in Canada, the percentage? Don't track it.
Well, so here lies the big challenge, and it's something that I'm working on, is that we don't have that data
Mm,
because it isn't being tracked.
mm,
We don't, like the government, when charities in Canada file their T3010s, which is kind of our equivalent of your 990s, there's no category for how much is coming in from gifts and wills and planned giving. It's all revenue from individuals and then revenue from corporations.
mm,
It isn't segmented in that way. And there's no institution that's tracking that. So that's a
mm.
project I'm working on right now.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
you're working on that. Maybe you'll
Yeah.
make a change. Do you have any idea why, what are they doing differently in those countries that their percentage is how much higher?
I think um I think it comes down to, well, first of all, I can tell you from the UK at least, I would say is the strength of the Remember a Charity campaign, which is the equivalent of Leave a Legacy. And
Mm,
this is what's really interesting. So, Leave a Legacy started in the US, right? And then it was replicated and adapted in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, et cetera, et cetera. So the US started it, but it hasn't been a concerted national campaign, right? And so, but in the UK, it has been.
mm,
And so it started in let me think, 2007, yeah, approximately. Again, I'm going to have to fact check myself, but it started not like after the US campaign. So remember, charity is really well known. It has demonstrated how that national campaign has evolved, increase in British people's recognition of what gifts and wills can do and how they can leave a gift in a will. It has increased over the years because of Remember a Charity. But from what I see in the US, for instance, there's no concerted national campaign. It really is it's regional or by state or et cetera. So it's not concerted. So you can have like one area that they have a very good committee working on Leave a Legacy, but another state will not. And so then that doesn't allow that increase in consciousness of the American people to consider a gift and a will. And I specifically always say gifts and will. And I think that's another thing that perhaps works to the disadvantage, at least to the US, is because it's very minded towards the financial vehicles as opposed to what we know instinctively and by practice, that the one donation vehicle in plan giving that is the most democratic and that everybody can do is a gift and a will. But yet we keep going harping and harping about all of these financial vehicles that only a small portion of our donors actually do. Because why? And I welcome, like, challenge me, Linda, because you're American and you've been in the sector much longer than I have. But what I've observed and looking at all this is that in the US, much like in Canada, like I have to say, in Canada it's quite similar, but it's evolved quite a bit. Um, is that the structure and the way plan giving is marketed is a reflection of all the big institutions, the big universities,
Mm.
the big cultural institutions, the hospitals. So what happens? Those are the minority of the philanthropic sector. So the small, medium-sized charity emulate that, thinking that that's the standard, that they need to be doing this without perhaps adapting the approach to recognize, well, yeah, but the donors that give to Harvard or to NYU or to, big universities, they're different than your donors in your small, medium-sized charity. So you need to adapt your approach. And at least that's what I've observed giving a lot of workshops and working with US based organizations. That's what I've observed. It's like, why are you trying to do everything? You can't be everything to everyone. So pick the one or two things that are really simple and easy to explain and easy to manage internally. And then just drive that message home over and over again. And if a donor knows about annuities and they're interested in leaving an annuity to your organization, then you go get that help to help you, arrange that. But then but if you're a small organization and you probably have point 0.5 FTE to dedicate to plan giving, then stick to gifts and wheels.
Mm.
Keep it simple,
That's certainly
you
the
know?
easiest and, like you said, the most prevalent. So you work with all size organizations, I'm assuming. I mean, Greenpeace, of course, was a huge one and a great organization, by the way, also.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you've worked with some of the smaller organizations and helping them. I'm
Yeah.
curious about, other than legacy giving. I know you work with other types of giving also, but do you find that the differences between annual giving or capital campaigns, things like that, are they different throughout different cultures also?
Um, no, because that those are just fundamentals. But what differs is how it's called. And I think this is perhaps another hindrance that we see a lot in North American fundraising, and I'm saying this because we see that in Canada, is the silos of calling it, oh, this is annual giving, this is capital campaign, this is major gifts, and then that's plan giving in the corner back there. We don't talk to those weird people because they only talk about death, right? But what we see in other countries is it's not structured in that way. It's more through the lens of a journey for the donor. So lead acquisition, conversion, increase. I always screw up this term, not increase, but yeah, conversion, upgrade, and then going into the big gifts, the high value gifts. So they frame their fundraising program as more from a what is the journey of the donor, as opposed to the old school 1980s silos of I'm annual campaign, I'm monthly giving, I'm major gifts,
Have
which
you read
again,
Stephen Meyer's Personalized Philanthropy?
I have not know.
You should get that book because he talks a lot about that. He's from the US, but he talks a lot about that very fact that we shouldn't have planned giving officers and major giving officers. And, it's all about the donor. And I really like his concept, and it sounds exactly like what you're saying. So maybe you should
Mhm.
write a book yourself if you haven't yet.
I am in the process of
Oh,
writing
yeah. Oh,
one.
what is your book about? Tell me about that.
Well, my superpower is the infrastructure element of how to set up a good legacy program.
Mm.
Um, it's the non-sexy stuff. You go, and I'm looking this way because this is where I have my fundraising um, library here, and this is
Oh,
just a little bit, yeah. So when you do an inventory of most plan giving books, a lot of them, I would say the vast majority are all about the marketing side of it.
mm,
But very few talk about the infrastructure. What do you need to have in place and
mm,
how do you put it in place? And so I'm in the process of, and when I say I'm in the process, I'm not dedicating an awful lot of time because I'm also doing a PhD, so that
oh,
is more of a
congratulations.
priority. Yeah, well, it's going to take forever to get, like, at the rate I'm going, it's going to take forever. But yeah, it's going to be a book. It's going to be a series of books on like the infrastructure. What do you need to have in the back end? How do you set up your CRM, your internal systems? What is the experience you're giving your donors? How do you do donor journeys? But applying the evidence and the research and how you can how to set up a program that is data informed. So that's
That
the approach
sounds
I'm taking.
that
Mm.
sounds really fascinating. You have to let us know when that book is out so we can
Yeah,
sure. But
yeah.
do you have a title yet in mind?
No, no, I'm still in the like structure because I'm actually Beth Cantor was the inspiration of all this. Years back, we were at the Italian fundraising conference, and we were just talking and talking, and she looks at me, she goes, "Well, so when are you writing a book?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? What do I have to say?" And she's like, "Yeah," and then she basically told me, she goes, her first book was basically a combination of all the blogs that she had written, and then she structured it, and then she improved and like added what was missing, et cetera, et cetera. She goes, if you've been writing this blog, because at the time that's when I was writing my Globetrotting Fundraiser blog, she goes, take that as the foundation and then build on it. And so that's what I'm doing.
That's one of the bad things about us authors. We always think everybody should write a book. And I have talked a few friends into it, so I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
happy about that. But I
yeah.
think authors just want everybody to write.
Yeah. I mean, now it's, I know that there's no money in writing a book. It's more for a
No,
personal challenge, but I've been asked often enough, so I figured, oh, why not? Should be fun. Should be a fun challenge and
uh, take it
journey.
from somebody who's written 40 of them. I'm not
I know I have a
drowning
few of
in
them
money
here.
that comes in. But
Yeah,
to me, writing a book is all about the legacy that you leave for the
exactly.
profession. That's why it got me started. And the biggest thrill in my life is when somebody comes up to me at a conference or something and says, "Oh, I have your book and it's all dog-eared and underlined and highlighted. And it's my Bible." And I'm like, wow, I actually affected
Yeah.
somebody with it. So even if it's only one
Yeah.
person in a room, it makes you feel it was
Yeah.
worthwhile.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I love it when people come up to me and say, "Oh, I read your blog and I felt like you were talking to me." I'm like, "Yes." Like if that's all I get, I'm like, "That's good. Good. That's all I want."
Great, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, are you still, you said when you used to write blogs, are you not doing a blog anymore
Oh, no,
or?
no, yeah. Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes. Actually, I yesterday it came out because I just got back into writing on a more regular basis.
oh,
So
okay.
I publish on the 1st and on the 15th. No, it's
Oh,
just that when I started
oh, when you
writing,
started, sorry,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you were
But
still writing blogs. I wanted to make
yeah,
sure.
the last couple of years have been harder because I was traveling so much, and then I was also, getting settled into this house, and that needed a lot of work. So some of my writing got sidelined, but I've just
Yeah,
recently got back into it, and I'd forgotten how much I enjoy writing. It's every time there's anxiety around, oh, what am I going to talk about? And then suddenly an idea comes in and it just flows. But also because I want people. I don't know, like I don't know how many blogs you read, but sometimes I find um I want them to be an extension of who I am as a person as well. And so when I'm writing, I try to write it as if you and I were just sitting on a couch having coffee and,
Mhm.
shooting the shit kind of thing,
Right, yeah, that sounds good.
Um, I don't want it to sound corporate. I want it to sound authentic. And so, sometimes I'll throw in a little joke in there, a bit of sarcasm, because I think in the sector, and people take themselves so seriously sometimes.
You're right.
And it's like, come on, like this is plan giving, this is legacies. Like it can be kind of heavy if you, especially if you've done estate administration in the past, it can be pretty heavy. So you need the levity. And some of the ridiculousness that happens in nonprofits and in the sector. I'm also one of those, I'm like, I'll call the BS where the BS is. I'll point to the pink elephant in the room. And I mean, if we can't have a sense of humor about ourselves and about our sector, then what are we doing here? you know?
Exactly.
Um, so yeah. So I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but then again, neither is everyone my cup of tea either.
No,
But
I'm
I do
sure.
want my writing to be authentic, and I want people to feel like they can reach out and talk to me and.
But we'll make sure to give our readers a link to your blog so they can take advantage of this. And I love the fact that you bring a sense of humor into it because you're right. I think people take themselves way too seriously sometimes. And boy, we need that sense of humor now and then.
Well, and I find last few years, I think we need it more than ever. So,
That's true.
like if we can have a little get. I mean, of course, it has to be tasteful, and I'm not, I try not to be distasteful, but even in my presentations as well, it's like we gotta laugh, man. It's life is too short to be so
Right,
serious all the
for
time.
sure.
Mm,
Well, one
yeah.
question that's been on my mind is, and I know I was telling somebody about some of my travel experiences, and they said, you need to write a book about your travel experiences because I've had some bizarre stories from picking up total strangers in my car and just doing some very weird things. But tell me about some of the experiences you have had in your globetrotting career. What
Hmm.
are any fun, interesting, exciting? They don't have to be funny, but um,
Oh, I mean, there's always been something fun and exciting. Oh gosh, I should have come prepared for something like that. Um,
but you said you lived to travel, so I'm sure you've had some interesting experiences along the way.
yeah, I think, um, I mean, I am a careful traveler because I'm very cognizant and of the fact that I'm a female traveling alone. I
Mhm.
rarely travel with anyone, so I am careful. But So it's not like I've got one of those like juicy stories of like crazy, crazy stories or anything like that. But I guess oh gosh, I feel stuck now. And I'm sure like the moment we end the call, I'll be like,
You're
oh,
good.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
why
tell
didn't I
this
tell her about
story or
this?
that. Yeah. But uh I think to me the things about traveling that I appreciate the most and love is just, it's not, I gave up very quickly trying to go and see absolutely everything
Mhm.
because then you just burn yourself out. And I need to frame this along the way of like when you're traveling for business, like for instance, if I'm going to present at a conference, there's the lead up to leaving, right? Like you got to get your work ready. You got to make sure all your presentations are done because every conference organizer wants to have your presentation before the day of the conference. So there's a lot of work, and people don't realize how much work comes in to prepare for a presentation.
Right.
Like you only see an hour of that session. You don't see the 15 hours, 20
Yeah,
hours of
right.
prep and research to do that, right? And that, again, by the way, not compensated. Okay. But also like preparing your house and making sure that all of you know what I mean, like I live
Yeah.
alone, I have 3 pets, I need to make sure that there's someone
Oh.
house sitting and all of that, so there's a lot of anxiety around there. By the time you arrive at your destination, you're pretty jet lagged and tired and your body feels upside down, like you're literally really upside down. So I stopped trying to jam pack my days and go more for quality. Like I'd rather get up, once I'm up, go have breakfast and then grab my, my music and just go for a walk and explore and get a feel of the vibe of the city.
Mhm.
I would say like, 2 years ago, last year, no, 2 years ago, I got to go to Prague in between two conferences. I
Mm.
was presenting at the CEE conference, the Central Eastern Europe conference in
Oh,
Bratislava. And then I was presenting at Amsterdam for the IFC conference,
oh.
my favorite conference. And I had a weekend in between. So I did a weekend in Prague, and that had been on, it was a bucket list as
Mm.
a destination.
Mm.
And I was so happy to just get up and walk around the historical sites and just walk the sites and feel the vibe and walk into, I'm walking and it's right by the astrological clock in the old town
Mm.
square in Prague. Anyone that's watching this podcast, just Google it. It's absolutely beautiful. And here's something funny. I walk in and I'm walking and turns out there's a sex museum. I'm like, okay, this should be fun, right? It was so fascinating. Yeah, like old school, like, how the skirts and how in old days, like, antiquity kind of thing, how they would hide
When I
stuff
was
in
young.
clothing. Well, even before any of us were even like an imagination, right? It was just so fascinating how they would craft the clothing and the toys and the thing. You know what I mean? It sounds so ludicrous, but I thought it was fascinating. It wasn't really like gnarly like anything else. Like I
Right.
like doing things like that that are just that make you have whiplash.
Uh,
Just kind of like ending up at the Purse Museum in Amsterdam. You
mm.
think purse, man. But it was really interesting to see like going back through history how the concept of a purse, and when I say purse, is like anything that could carry anything, whether for men or for women, how that evolved, the whole history of that. It was fascinating. I'm weird that way. I found that interesting,
I would,
but
you know what I found interesting, and I can't remember where this was in Canada, maybe Toronto, the shoe museum. When you said Purse
oh, the badass
Museum,
shoe.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
really fascinating. And I thought, who would have thought a shoe museum could be so interesting?
Right? Right? Yeah, it's just things like that, and then you step out and you purposely getting lost. Sometimes you find these gems that, otherwise, like I don't want to spend my time traveling. When I travel, I don't want to spend my time inside of museums. But then you're walking and you see something like these museums, you go, oh,
What?
okay, I exactly what? And spend a couple hours and then go, wow, that was something else,
And I
you
think
know?
sometimes just getting away from the real touristy things is interesting. I know when we
Hmm.
went to Egypt, my former business partner and I went, and after we were finished with our work, we had allowed a number of days to just tour around. And of course, we saw the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything that typical tourists would see. But on the last night we were there, we had hired the same guide to take us to all these different places, and we really built up a relationship with him. And he was telling us about his wife and his kids, and we said, well, we'd love to meet them. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll pick you up in the back of the hotel, and I'm bringing my wife and my kids, and he took us to the real Cairo, not the touristy Cairo. And it was
Nice.
really just, like going to McDonald's with somebody. We weren't in a McDonald's, but it was
Yeah.
like that, the typical things that Egyptian citizens did.
Yeah.
I found
I
that
think,
really interesting.
yeah, I think that, that's been an advantage as someone who speaks several languages. So I was born in Argentina. So
Oh,
Spanish is my first language. Then I learned
oh,
French and then English was the last one. And then in school, I learned Italian and Portuguese. I don't speak it really well, but, um, whenever I've traveled to South America, whether it was for work or for pleasure, just the ease of being able to speak the language. And so then, as you said, like when you went to Cairo, getting like, you know, like backstage access to what the people from there really live like, as opposed to, the veneered, beautiful, touristy stuff. So that's always, to me, that's always where I remember that. Like the first time I went to Sao Paulo in Brazil,
mm,
um, I was still working at Greenpeace at the time, but I was going to present at the ABCR conference. And so I had to switch hotels to be near the conference center. And I take an Uber, and it was about a half an hour drive. And it was so funny because I speak Portuñol, so it's a mix of Portuguese and Spanish, right? That was the extent of what I could remember from like my old Portuguese classes. And the driver only spoke Portuguese, but lo and behold, for half an hour, we didn't stop talking the whole way. We talked about politics, we talked about the economy, we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. He spoke Portuguese, I spoke a mix of both, and we understood each other. And it was so much fun. I never would have been able to have a conversation like with any, just randomly like that.
right.
But he was just like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So I think I mean, those are the things that, I hold dear and that I never forget.
That's great.
Mm.
So I wanted to just go back to one thing about you. You talked a lot about legacy giving, but you do help people with other things as well as legacy giving. You mentioned grant writing a while ago. Do you do that as a
No, that was when
project?
I
That was when you
no,
were.
writing grants was when it was part of my job when I was
Right.
frontline fundraising. I was never good at it. I never liked it. I am in awe of people who specialize and are good at it, because I'd rather poke my eye repeatedly than write write a grant proposal.
You're
So
the same as me. As much as I love writing, the research that's involved with the grant writing is just
no,
totally
no.
blows my mind. So
Yeah, yeah. So props to people who do it
yeah.
happily and love it, because that's just not my jam. So, um, but yeah, I mean, of course, I specialize in gifts and wills now, but I've done plenty like, so the first 15 years of my career, I was a small shop fundraiser. So I was
Oh,
a generalist. I was
oh,
a generalist. So I did everything from donor acquisition to writing direct mail to writing grant proposals when I really need
oh.
to, and there was a gun to my head, major gifts, and then setting up legacy programs at different organizations I worked at in the past. And then that's when, from that I went on to, taking director of development positions in larger organizations. So again, still a generalist. I only like I started learning about plan giving pretty early on in my career, but really specialized in it when I got the job at Greenpeace in
Yeah.
2016. And that's when I already loved it, but I fell head over heels over
Mm,
it.
mm,
Um, but of course, now in the work that I do, when I'm working with an organization, you don't you don't help an organization only in legacies, because you have to analyze the entire fundraising program to see, well,
Right.
how is it that you're bringing in your donors, and are you bringing the quality donors into your pipeline in with a view to eventually one day having that legacy conversation. So anything that has to do with a planned giving program, a legacy program, involves looking and analyzing how your regular giving program runs, how your monthly giving program, how your mid-level giving program is run, what kind of journeys are you taking your donors, how you're recognizing them, how you stewarding them. Because if you're doing, a half-ass job, or, you're just treating your donors as a transaction,
Mhm.
then when we're going to start working on your planned giving program, we're going to have some serious issues. So we need to analyze all that and fix those things in order to have a successful legacy program.
Well, I think your book is going to be fascinating. I can't wait till it comes out because
Mhm.
I think I'm going to nudge you along the way every time I talk to you or see you. It's like, hey, how's that book coming
Is it
along?
coming? When is it coming? When is it
Now,
coming?
you mentioned that you're getting your PhD. What field?
So in
Oh,
philanthropy,
in
so
philanthropy. Okay.
I'm leaning on I'm researching how or if impact reporting helps build trust from donors, so
Hmm.
they can have so that we can have deeper conversations with them about gifts and wills. So it's,
Oh,
again, it's about legacies,
right.
but I'm looking at the element of what are the indicators, the trust indicators that help
Mhm.
um, bring trust and confidence in donors for legacy giving.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
really slow. It's really, really slow. It is really hard to do a PhD on a part-time basis while running a business.
Yeah. I was so
So
proud to just get my master's degree at the age of 81 while I was still actively working.
really? Oh my goodness, congratulations. That's a big milestone.
Well,
Wow.
people say, "What are you going to do with a degree in theology?" And I said, "I'm not going to
Who
do anything. I
cares?
just want to get a master's degree." And I thought it was an interesting topic, so here I am.
Yeah. Oh, I get that question a lot, of like, because I have two undergrads, I have a master's, and now doing this. And like, well,
Hmm.
I get asked like, oh, are you going to be able to make more money? I'm like, no, not at all. But it's the intellectual challenge, and also
Right.
like you were saying about writing books, it's the legacy I want to leave behind. If it helps someone else in the future being able to build more trust with donors, so that they can raise more through gifts and wills, then my job here is done.
And I think that's
Um,
important even outside of legacies and wills, just to get people to be repeat donors. And, I know the organizations that I support, I'm seeing what they're doing and I trust them. So I'm going to continue to give them monthly giving or whatever I
mhm,
choose to give. And
mhm.
probably some of those will get a legacy. In fact, I've just moved to my third state now. So I guess it's time to update my, in fact, I was looking for a plan giving attorney here in Kansas City, so I'm still looking, but
Mm,
I think that's it's those major gifts and not even major gifts. I don't consider myself a major donor to a lot of these organizations, but it's that trust that builds. So that's another book. Maybe you need to write two books.
well, a dissertation is a book technically, so
Well,
then
that's true. Yeah.
it'll be all about adapting it to the general public
All
after
right.
that. But
Good.
that's
Yeah.
that's going to take a while, because it's really, it's challenging. It's hard. I'll be really frank. It is hard,
I'll bet.
but
Yeah.
it's a great intellectual challenge, and
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it
Well, this
when
has
I have
been
time.
a great conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to leave people with that I forgot to ask you or didn't ask you?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, we could go on and on and on for
Well, have you
hours,
back
but
again for another, especially after those books get written.
yeah, exactly. No, I would just say, or slash challenge anyone that listens to the podcast and watches the podcast, is, maintain that, that you know that, and when I say childish, I don't mean it in a negative way. Like, you know, that curiosity as a child that we had
Mhm.
about everything, like looking at everything with through the lens of a small child. That's like, why like this? Why? Always ask the why about everything because I find, and I don't know if you experience this, Linda, but I find that's I see this a lot where a lot of uh, fundraisers go to conferences and they, and I'm generalizing, but like they hang on to every word of a presenter as if it's gospel. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you're in front of the room that you have all the facts. So question, challenge, um, ask for the evidence because let's not for and I find this happens a lot in all areas of fundraising, but especially in plan giving of just because Joe or Jane are up in front of the room that suddenly they're the experts. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm constantly learning every day. I just share what I learn and then try to make it as accessible as possible. But I think I'm jumping all over the place. But yeah, maintain that curiosity and challenge notions of what we've always done. Because sometimes there's things we can learn differently. And yeah, we need to have the evidence to back it up.
Well, that is really some wise advice. I think if you, I know I said this before, but if you take nothing else away from uh, this podcast, maybe that's a good lesson to challenge even what the so-called experts, they don't know it all
Mhm.
either. So
And
I,
things are always evolving. That's why research exists, right? Because like a notion at this one point in time could be completely different or modified in 5 years' time. But if
exactly.
you hang on to something because it fits your narrative or it's convenient, then think about the ramifications and the impact in for your organization and your donors.
Sure. Well, really want to thank you for this. It's been very enlightening for me, and just kind of sharing some of your career stories have been very inspiring. So I think we are going to have you on again.
That would be lovely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.